Mr. Sergeant of Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Sherrill will serve as chaplain of the day. Representative Sherrill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today with us, we have Pastor Brad Walker, has served as the senior pastor at Sparta First Baptist Church in his home church since 2015. God called Brad to serve in the ministry in 2000. He served churches in various roles in Kentucky, Mississippi, and Tennessee for over 17 years. Brad attended seminary, pursuing a master's divine degree in the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. Brad has been married to his wife, Eli, for 18 years, and they have 4 sons, Will, Jack, Ben, and Jude. Brad also has been a survivor of multiple sclerosis for 16 years and seeks to point others to the all-significance Jesus Christ as their Savior. Just a few other words to say about Brother Brad. Monday, as I was leaving home coming down, stopped by the church there for a few minutes to talk with him about today. You know, prayer is very important in my life, and I know others it is too, and maybe it's not very important in others, but prayer is very important. And I just want to let you know, as I say a few words about Brad, that before I left there Monday, he said, "Can I have prayer with you? Pray for you." And I just want to let you know he's a good man that cares about his flock, cares about his people, and he cares about what he does for the Lord. So at this time, we would ask Brother Brad if he would lead us in prayer.
Let's pray. Our perfect Heavenly Father, we humbly bow before you. You are infinitely sovereign, wise. You are good. You are merciful, strong, just, gracious. You are loving and you are holy in all your ways. Our stammering tongues fail to declare the excellencies of your greatness. Oh, Father of lights, you are creator and sustainer of life, and we thank you for every good and perfect gift that comes from your righteous right hand. As we gaze upon your righteousness, oh God, we're reminded that righteous we are not. Our ways are not your ways, and our thoughts are not your thoughts. We all, like sheep, have gone astray, and we have rebelled and rejected you, the fountain of living water, and dug for ourselves cisterns that hold no water, according to your word. We deserve death for our rebellion and separation because of our desertion of you. But you, O King of Kings, did not leave humanity in a state of despair. Though if you did, you would not be unjust. You did not abandon and leave us destitute from the counsel of your own will, out of the reservoir of your infinite grace. You pierced through the darkness and you brought the light of your Son, your perfect Son, Jesus Christ. And it's by his perfect life that he fulfilled your law's demands, the very thing that we could not do. And because of his perfection, he who became no sin became sin for us so that we might be righteous before you. He took our place and condemned, he stood on the cross. And by his resurrection, he beat sin, Satan, and death. That for all who believe in him, they can have eternal life. And now he is ascended to the right hand of you, O God, and he sits on the throne where he reigns and he rules. And we await his return, where the benevolent monarchy will be perfect and without rival one day in the new heaven, new earth. But until that day, your word tells us that you have appointed men and women to be leaders and servants, that government is to wield the sword of justice, to uphold peace, to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. And Lord, as I stand before these servants, my prayer is that you would uphold them with your righteous right hand. You would draw them to yourself. I pray that they would walk in your ways, that you would give them peace that passes all understanding. God, we pray that you would guide this assembly of House of Representatives as they seek to walk in wisdom. Help them to live above reproach. Lord, we ask that you would forgive us for the times where we have been quick to speak and slow to listen. Forgive us for too often exhibiting anger of man that doesn't produce righteousness. May we put away anything that does not please you, and we receive meekness, the implanting of your word in our hearts. God, we pray for health and strength for these legislators. We pray for the staff that supports them, for their families. Please be with this body, this session, as they conduct the business of our state. Give them peace as they juggle many responsibilities. Give each of them your peace that surpasses all understanding. We thank you for these dear servants, and may they be men and women of high character, of good judgment, of uncommon ability, and may their policies promote human flourishing and protect the lives of the most vulnerable. We ask for your blessing that we might continue to be a free and prosperous people. Grant us courage to stand up for what is right, to the strength to try to make a difference, and the gospel-formed humility to accept that there are no messiahs except Jesus, and no heaven on earth except the one waiting for us at the end of this age. Come, Lord Jesus, quickly. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Representative Sherrill will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Representative Sherrill.
Can we get a photo with you?
Yeah.
And his children is in the back.
That's fine. Yep. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 95 members present.
Let the journal reflect Representatives Gant, Eldridge, and Rudder. All right, let's do this again. Let the journal reflect Representatives Gant, Potts, and Travis are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
We have two presentations, or three. Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I request that Representative Sexton join me in the well and the Sergeant of Arms escort our guests into the chamber.
Mr. Sergeant of Arms, please escort the guests to the well. Chairman Faison, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that the clerk read the resolution.
Mr. Clerk, please read the resolution.
House Joint Resolution 1078 by Chairman Faison and others, a resolution to commend Representative Jerry Sexton for his honorable and astute service to the people of Tennessee as a member of the House of Representatives. Whereas it is most appropriate that the members of this General Assembly should honor those fellow legislators who have performed their duties with the utmost integrity and whose efforts during their time in office have been dedicated to providing thoughtful and exemplary service to their districts and to this great state. And whereas Representative Jerry Sexton of Bean Station is one such distinguished public servant who has served both his constituency and this legislative body with honor and ability. And whereas during his tenure, Representative Sexton has been a highly influential figure in the political, social, and civic life of Claiborne, Granger, and Union counties, and he has served his constituents in numerous capacities, always working diligently at his elected duties and expending the necessary effort to understand the opposing sides of complex issues. And whereas Jerry Sexton has distinguished himself as a public-spirited citizen of the highest order and as an exceptional asset to the good people of the 35th House District, whom he has served as a member of the 109th through 112th General Assemblies, and whereas throughout his service, Jerry Sexton has been prominent as a dedicated and well-informed legislator who always votes his conscience, and whereas born on March 9th, 1957, Representative Sexton is the highly regarded owner of Sexton Furniture Manufacturing and a member of Nominee Missionary Baptist Church. And whereas many accomplishments aside, Representative Sexton is most grateful for the love and support of his wife, Marcia, and their children, Terry and Matthew. And whereas Representative Sexton is wholly committed to the noble precepts of public service that have earned Tennessee recognition as the volunteer state, and he should be specially recognized for his exemplary tenure in the General Assembly. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the state of Tennessee, the Senate concurring, that we hereby honor Representative Jerry Sexton for his meritorious service to Tennessee as a member of the House of Representatives, commend him for his countless contributions and many good works in service of the citizens of the 35th House District, and extend to him our best wishes for much continued success and happiness.
Lear Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All right, everybody come up here and love on Representative Sexton. So, Jerry, I just want to say a couple of words here. Just as folks are loving on you and hugging your neck, you and your family have been extraordinarily special to us here. And if you've ever wondered what anybody truly wants on their tombstone, not that he's passing away now, he's just leaving the legislature. But what I think any of us could ask for is that we've lived our life in a way that they would say, here lies a good Christian man. And Jerry, I think with 100% of confidence, every single one of us in this chamber can say that about you. Every decision you've made down here, every issue that we've dealt with, every time I've seen you interact with constituents, you have composed yourself as a good Christian man. And I think that is the highest compliment that I can pay you, sir. Thank you for your service to the great state of Tennessee, and we appreciate your friendship.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, one of the neat things about being in leadership is you travel all across the state and meet people in their districts and where they're from. Several years ago, I went over to his business where he builds furniture. And he took me all through this place. And maybe some of y'all don't realize this, but Representative Sexton is an incredibly successful man. And he has this huge business. And I'll never forget, as I walked around this huge warehouse where they're building furniture, every single employee had the utmost respect for him. I've talked with my roommate, Gary Hicks, and we've reminisced about how the people love him that work for him. That shows testament to a man who started out on the line as a young man building furniture, and now he's a grown man. He owns the furniture store. He owns where they build it. He's worked himself all through that, and there's people that have worked with him this whole way, and they still love him, and they still know that he's a good man. That, to me, shows the testament of a man's integrity. The final thing I'll tell you about him, several years ago when we were still in War Memorial Building, I was at a devotion, and it was Jerry Sexton's turn to teach devotions that morning. He doesn't really teach. I guess y'all know that. It's more of a East Tennessee windsucker when he gets going. Kind of did that last week. And he like, in East Tennessee, he shucks the corn. I don't know if y'all know, or he'll really come after it. I think he gets that from his wife. And Jerry said something that I'll never forget. And it made an impact, and he doesn't know even made an impact in my life that day, but he did. And I remember the room we were in when he said it. He said, when I was elected, Everybody at home said, Jerry, when you get up there, don't let those people change you. And Jerry said, I came up here and I'm not letting a soul change me. If anything, I might change them, but they're not changing me. And that's actually a pretty cool thing to know that with all the pressures from people at home, the pressures from lobbyists, pressures of anything else, a man to come in and say, you'll not buy me. My vote's not for sale. My integrity's not for sale. My character's not for sale. I will walk out of here with the integrity that I came in. Guys, that's impressive. And that's what I believe, and I have watched my friend Jerry Sexton do. I also want to give a shout out to his sweet little wife. She is like a banty rooster if y'all don't know her. Woo! And she has done a phenomenal job supporting her husband. And anytime you see a man that's full of character and successful man, I promise you, he's got a woman behind him that has greater integrity and greater success in mind to make sure her man is who he is. So thank you for your service. Thank you both. And Mr. Speaker, if you would allow Preacher Sexton to approach the well.
Representative Sexton, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Leader and Chairman. Thank you, colleagues, all of you that I come in together with, Patsy and my Israeli friends. Yeah, Reedy. It's, it's hard to mention names because you'll forget someone. But I am blessed. I grew up like a lot of us, just poor and big family. There was 10 of us kids, and my mama never worked a public job. My daddy was a coal miner. We were poor, didn't have anything, but we had each other, and I was taught great principles and to love the Lord and love family. And I've been blessed so much. I just can't tell you how much. This little lady right here, she's not very large, but God gave her a good set of lungs. And I honestly believe that she could give William Lambert a go for his money on talking. But she has always been the greatest helper that any man could ever have. I've always told her she's my greatest cheerleader, and everything that we do together. Family is so important to me. And one thing I have never had, I pastored a church. I've owned my own business and operated that, pastored a church for 25 years. But this place was different. This place caught me off guard. You become close to these folks, even when you don't agree with them, even when you vehemently don't agree with them. You still love them and appreciate them. You know why? Because each and every one of us have the very same challenges. You've got your people, you've got your decisions, you've got your thoughts, and you want to put those forward. You don't want to push and be bully someone or be bullied. But I'm very passionate about what I believe. But I certainly respect each and every one of you for what you believe and how you stand, because you stand the very best that you know how. And because when it comes down to the end of the road, there's only one that we have to give an account to, and that's God Almighty. When I lay down on my bed at night, I want to know that all is clear between me and Him, and all is well. Because one of these days, Doc, we are going to lay down our last breath. And I want to be accepted. But I want to make a difference. I want to be a difference, a good difference to this world and to Tennessee. And I can just say thank you to each and every one of you. My little collection of friends back there, our seatmates, we've just had the best time this last 2 years. We haven't learned much about legislation, but we've enjoyed being here. And I'd like to say to Speaker Sexton that he's done a fabulous job the last few years. He's conducted this business well, and he's made us proud, and I appreciate him. I just wish he'd let me get a few more of my bills out, but that's okay. It's okay. Thank you for letting me be a part of you, but what I'd like to say, I've heard soldiers talk about the band of brothers. This is the closest I've ever come to having that feeling. You know, there's just a bond between us because there's 99 of us, and we sometimes don't agree with each other, and then we have to defend each other because we are brothers and sisters fighting the same fight to do what we think is best for Tennessee. Thank you for letting me be a part of you and this process.
Amen. Amen. Well said.
Chairman Faison.
Mr. Speaker, will you join us in the well for a picture?
If I could take just 1 minute and mention a very special lady, Nicole Usry. She's been my assistant now, and I loved all my assistants, but I've never had one like her. She's the hardest working. She can get more things done than anybody that I see. So if I've had good talking points this year, it's because of her. If I've done good research, it's because she done it. I didn't do any of it. She done it all. She's made me look very good, I guess, I hope. But anyway, she's just a jewel, so much so that I've told her that there's a good place in East Tennessee. If her husband and her would like to come, I'd like to have her in my business. So I don't know if she's probably not gonna move, but who knows, maybe. But she's been a jewel, a real jewel. Thank you, Nicole.
Representative Garrett, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, could I request Representative Joe Towns and Representative Barbara Cooper join me in the well, please?
Representative Cooper and Representative Towns, please join Representative Garrett in the well. Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For those of you, this is going to be a surprise for Representative Cooper. She has no clue what we're about to do, so I'm going to give her we'll give her a little time to get down here. Okay. Now, members, I'm going to do something that my mama and my wife would probably not approve of. I'm going to reveal today a lady's age. I'm real glad Representative Cooper didn't drive her scooter down here, because I'm not sure that I would survive after this. This time last year, maybe 13 months ago, Joe and I was watching Miss Cooper, Representative Cooper, come down and present some legislation. And it came to us and said, I wonder if someone at the tender young age at that time of 91 could beat her as a member of the Tennessee State Legislature. And come to find out, there is none. From the history that they kept records from the state of Tennessee, there is no one that has served in this chamber at her tender young age of 92 years old. So Joe and I were talking one day, and we said, that is history being made every second this young lady to my right serves among us in this chamber. But we didn't stop there. I've got to thank my office and lots of interns, because I said to myself, Joe, is that just the state of Tennessee that could be a record? So some of the folks in my office and some of the interns called every single state legislature in the country to see. One of them actually spoke to the Michigan Speaker of the House. He picked up his phone. I'm not sure if our speaker would pick up his phone. I don't know, maybe he would. No one else, he's giving me the eye back there. He's going to cut off my mic. Believe it or not, you didn't win. You didn't win. There is a lady in New Hampshire that is serving at 96 years old, but she's a Republican. Ms. Cooper, in the country at 92 years old, you are the most youngest, terrible English, at 92 Democrats serving in the nation. So when Joe and I Oh, back, we were standing back here, and you zoomed up and knocked the well over. And we said we're going to set out to figure out a way in the most nicest, politest way, revealing a young lady's age, and honor you. So we've gotten your favorite colors in your flowers, and these, all of us from the General Assembly is going to give you this, where you will always know when it says for you, no age limit on service, it's just a number. Representative Barbara Cooper. So in your honor, Mr. Speaker, if I could yield my time to Representative Joe Towns, please.
What was your name again? What was it? Representative Towns, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Representative Gary's giving you guys the backstory on it. And we think that obviously, like our parents have taught us, you give people their flowers while they're what? While they're alive, okay? And Representative Cooper has been like a big sister, a mother, a hero in our community for a very, very long time. And I was just so grateful that Representative Garrett wanted to join with me in doing this. You got to understand her story, okay? Barbara Cooper ran 5 times before she got elected. 5 times. Persistence, okay? Not only that, as a little girl, you know, you're not going to believe this. As a little girl, who here is familiar with Boss Crump? Boss Crump in our neck of the woods, okay, across the country. She was a little girl having an opportunity to work. I mean, a young girl with her parents in that environment, okay? Her history goes back that far in our country. And the stories that she could tell, if you have an opportunity to talk with her at some point, will blow your mind. She also, her and her husband, when she started up here, her husband was with her. I don't know, many of y'all remember Mr. Cooper. We called him Pops, okay? He's since passed on, transition on, okay? They single-handedly, with the support of the community, fought a case because her husband was one of the first African-American firemen that went to the Supreme Court. Believe it or not, Ms. Cooper won. Her and Pop won the case, okay? She's been a fighter in our community for an extremely long time. She is actually taught 35 years in the school system plus, 35 years plus, and she's still teaching now. If you want to get on her bad side, start working against children. You all see the kind of legislation she brings, you know what she cares about, education and children. She does it over and over and over again, and she's still teaching us today. She takes us to task on things. She's quiet and meek until you cross the line, okay? And to the woodshed, okay? Okay? But the deal of it is that it's so amazing to see her still passing legislation. And whatever it is she's drinking is what we want, okay? We need some of that. She is today, we consider her as our Sojourner Truth, our McLeod Bethune, our absolute hero that's still in our midst, our living midst. And her faith is very important to her. Believe it or not, she'll tell you about her faith. Being an African-American woman going that far back, she'll tell you there's no way in the world she would have made it without her faith. Her faith has been tested over and over and over and over again. Yet she comes out still like a shining, devoted star to Christ, still trying to make a way for those that have had, you know, to trod up the rough side of the mountain. She's still here doing it. And for that, Tennessee should look at her as a Tennessee treasure. And we should treasure her as a Tennessee treasure and try to learn as much as we can. Get the recipes of her life, figure out how she's done some of the things she's done. She's even served and been around under 17 presidents. We've only had 44. 17. That's more than a third, okay? So what we want to do is I want to get, Mr. Speaker, I want Reverend Love to come up. There's love in the house. There need to be some love in the house. Where's the love? Where's the love, man? Come on, Love. If you don't mind, Mr. Speaker, you mind? Reverend say something?
Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We certainly want to honor Dr. Cooper. If you walk the halls of Cordell Hall and you see those composite photos, many of us can look back and say we wish we had served with someone on there. We are blessed that we are serving with someone who others will one day walk by and say, I wish I had served with Dr. Barbara Cooper. So let us not ever take that for granted, to draw from her wellspring of wisdom and tenacity as we go off and serve our community. Let us pray. God, we thank you, first of all, for this day's rising up and going out. We thank you, Lord, for the chance to gather today, to lift up, oh God, and celebrate one in whom you have put your spirit and one whom you have called to public service. God, we thank you for her spirit. We thank you for her voice. We thank you for her wisdom, God. We thank you for all of those who she has influenced and will continue to influence. God, we pray blessings upon her health, blessing, God, upon her strength. And God, continue to remind us of how valuable it is for us to remember that we are all bound together by this common thread of humanity. This is our prayer in your Son, Jesus the Christ's name. Amen.
Representative Garrett.
Mr. Speaker, if it's appropriate, could you recognize Senator Ackberry for a few remarks?
Yes, Senator, you're recognized.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Cooper is my political godmother. She saw someone who was interested in politics, and when I got my first call at midnight from her, I knew that she was about business. I cannot think of someone who is more dedicated to her community, tireless, to the point where when we were going to community meetings, I'd say, Coop, I'm tired. And she said, no, we got 2 or 3 more to go. She is a real jewel, and I am so happy. I know she's going to kill all of us, but I'm so happy that we can honor her, and I love you so much, and thank you. And she's a queen maker. Those of you that don't know that, people say king makers. There are a lot of women that we can point to that, but for Representative Barbara Cooper, they would not be in office, and I'm one of those people. Thank you. Oh, and she is running for re-election, FYI.
That's right. That's right.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It's an honor to stand here and honor and recognize you, Representative Cooper. But, you know, Representative Garrett said something about history and the walls of this chamber and how every day we're with living history. And so many of us still here in this chamber right now serve with other history makers. So Tennessee has a rich history and legacy of history makers. Beth Harwell was the first woman speaker. We walked and touched her while she was here. Lois DeBerry was the longest serving Speaker Pro Tem in the country for 40 years. We walked, touched, and learned from her. And so you're in that class of history makers here for the state of Tennessee. And we're honored to stand here, walk, touch, and learn from you. It means a lot to us. And we appreciate everything you've done for every citizen in this state. When we look back at your legacy, we'll be able to say, we knew somebody who made a difference in the lives of the people in the state of Tennessee. So congratulations on your recognition today. I know you're going to choke us later, but God is good. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am really without words. And Mr. Speaker, I started to come in here this week. And I guess it's just something, God is good. And he has been good to me. I'll have to acknowledge that on the first. And to all of you who are here, this is one of the biggest rewards that I could have or experience in my life. Here's John Ray. John, oh, he up here. I thought he was standing out here. Not John Ray. Yeah, you're okay too. But John Mark, what you doing sitting down there? Now, this is my son, my brother from another mother. Come on up here, John. Now, John helped me with my husband. Many of you and Representative Towns mentioned you him. He kept me and helped me to keep him in place up here because everyone thought that he was the state representative. Thank you so much for your love. And I just really don't have the words to tell you how much I appreciate the honor. I have to say I appreciate it. I'm not one of big surprises. I don't make a lot of noise other than when you cross the line as representing the town say. Uh, I have 3 children. My oldest child is deceased, Carl Cooper, who was born and raised in Memphis and attended Manassas High School and then Tennessee State University, hey, TSU. And like they said, my husband came up here with me until he died. Every week he was here with me. And I think about it sometimes when things don't go like I think to do, and I'm making comments. He said, "This is your job." He asked, I said, "What would you do?" He said, "This is your job. I don't have anything to do with it." But they still thought that he was a state representative. I have 2 daughters who are living. One in Memphis, who's a retired teacher, and the other one in in Connecticut. She is an adjunct professor at Yale. She's a graduate of well, in the high school, of course, UT Martin. The youngest one graduated from, or went to UT Martin, but graduated from Lamar College. And I'm proud of my young ladies. My daughter in Connecticut is a minister. She's a pastor of a church. Plus, like I said, an adjunct professor at Yale. She had graduated from Yale in divinity. And so I'm proud of them. I wanted to mention to them, they have held me up. My daughter told, I didn't want to run anymore. My daughter told me I better run. She doesn't want me to quit. I said, I gotta quit sometime. But this is really a great surprise. Many times I reflect back on how I grew up segregated, about half of my years being segregated as a teacher in a classroom, teaching in segregated schools, using books that were already used. And then, we had busing. I was a part of that because when I left the classroom, I was hired as a community relations specialist. You call that working with Title I parents. They were all over the place, out of control. And they put me in charge of the Title I parents so that they would learn how to work without conflict with the Board of Education, because they were really involved with their children's education. So I had to get them together, organize them, and work with them. They filed a lawsuit on Memphis City Schools. I had to go to Washington, D.C. to help my superintendent, Ms. Connie Stevens, who trained me. I have to give her the credit to get the Board of Education and parents together so that they could talk and communicate and solve the problems with children who could not read, who were reading 2 or more years in academics, in reading and math. So that was a great opportunity for me to work with parents on that level. And I continue to work with parents until I retired. Now, I just would like to thank you again. You're standing. I know you're tired. We have a long day. I think I looked at the calendar. We have something like almost 200 bills. So there is a lot I could say. Representative Towns, Representative Garrett, I appreciate you. I appreciate my Black Caucus members. Sometimes I'm really upset at them. Really right now, really upset. And I'm gonna get it straightened out. We're not gonna go through this anymore. So, but I just want to thank you again, and Representative Love just took over TSU, so I'm standing back watching to see what he's doing. And I think, the speaker, come on down, speaker. Now I know you do not used to Barbara Cooper telling you what to do.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's get a picture.
Hey, members, why don't everybody come up and go around the well and everything and get a whole group picture instead of just with parts of the body? Representative Sapicki, you're recognized.
Members, let me share a story with you about a son's love for his mother. Zandra Ray Havener Sapicki was born in St. Louis, Missouri, born April 3rd, 1932, and died April 27th at 5:30, 2022 this morning. She was married to Leonard Stephen Sapicki Sr. on May 10th, 1952 at the age of 20, and stood by his side for 45 years until my father died October 10th of 97. She carried on in the same home they were married in for 25 years after my father died. She was the mother of 5, Pamela, Leonard Jr., Georgette, Scott, and Kelly. My mom was always there at home. She lived her whole life as a stay-at-home mom. Cooked every day for us, very rarely went out. Did all our wash. I did homework at the kitchen table because she said I had to. When my mother and father realized that I was gifted by God with athletic ability, they made a sacrifice and sent me to a private school that would allow me to flourish as an athlete and get a scholarship to a Division I university. I remember when I came home from my recruiting visit from Wisconsin, where I ended up going to school, my mom and dad told me, especially my mom, that she would never try to influence where I went to school. But when I got off the plane from Madison, she had a Wisconsin scarf on and was trying to make it perfectly clear.
She was my greatest cheerleader. No matter how I did on the athletic field, she always gave me hugs and said how proud she was of me. My two most cherished memories of my mother was when I was announced as a senior walking out at Camp Randall for the last time on the football field, and my mother was crying, just crying. And I looked down at her and I said, Mom, they're not cheering for me. They're thanking you for sending me to Wisconsin and the job you did raising me as a man. And some of you may have seen this when I played for the Nashville Express. I hit a home run when the Barons came to town, and I have a video of my mother jumping like a cheerleader up and down as I crossed home plate. As a representative, on my way up here during session, I spoke to her twice a week on the phone, telling her about the things we were doing, and she was so proud of what we were doing here in Tennessee and wished the state of Missouri would follow our lead. By the grace of God, I was able to see her this Sunday, and she opened her eyes, and I said, I'm here. And I told her I loved her, and I said goodbye, and it was okay to go rest. And she told me she loved me and was very proud of me. Life is short, and it is filled with great memories that I'll take with me till the day I die. This Mother's Day, May 8th, remember your mother and thank her for being there. It is the toughest job in the world being a mother. Members, if you'll join me in a moment of silence for Zandra Ray Havener Sapicki. Thank you.
We're under welcome and honoring Representative Wendell.
Mr. Speaker, Curtis Johnson, Jason Hodges, and Patricia Collins would like to recognize and thank a young man that we've had the pleasure of working with since January. Joseph, where are you? Wave to us, Joseph. Joseph is a student at Tennessee Tech, and in the 32 years I've been here, Joseph has been a really, really great pleasure to work with. He's a nice young man. He's a great reflection on his parents. And I'd like to tell each of you in this chamber that Joseph intends to join the Peace Corps when he graduates from Tennessee Tech. And I'm so glad to get to know him and have the chance to work with him. And you hear a lot of negative things about young people and what's going on in the world today. If you're around somebody like Joseph very long, you won't have a negative impression of what the future holds. Because if the next generation has the same character and fortitude this young man has, it's going to be better than it is today. So our best days are ahead if he's any indication. Joseph, it's been a pleasure to get to know you, and we wish you the best. And Patricia and I will be cheering for you at least for the next 40 years, we hope. Thank you much, and I've enjoyed our friendship. Thank you.
Representative Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Shaw and I rise today, members. We have guests in the gallery up to our right from Haywood County, Tennessee. We have our leadership class visiting us today, so please make them feel welcome. Thank you.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I sent an email out to everybody earlier today or yesterday about a treat truck. And I would like to welcome Friends Life and let you know a little bit about who they are and what they do. So Friends Life is a nonprofit rehabilitation center here in Nashville that supports families with adult children with developmental disabilities. And one of their goals is to ensure that each one of their friends develops to their fullest potential. And part of that is through social enterprise and having them work and interact with people every day. And so today they're going to be here serving us popsicles and ice cream, but make sure and talk to them, understand what their programs are, because I'm sure you all have one in your community as well. So thank you.
Representative Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I rise to congratulate my mother and father, Tony and Lila Garish, for 65 years of marriage on this day. So, Mom and Dad, congratulations from Tennessee.
Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is my middle brother's birthday. His name is Jeffrey LeBron Dixie. And when you say you have the middle child syndrome, he did everything you could possibly do to prove that theory true. So happy birthday, Jeff, and love you.
Representative Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm honored to have with me my better half. My wife, Mary Lauren, is with me today. If you would help me welcome her to the chamber.
Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, today is Administrative Professionals Day. So just wanted to make everybody aware of that. We see all the bills that are sitting up there at the desk. We know without our legislative assistance, none of those bills would be there. They're largely responsible for all the different things, keeping us on the right track, responding to emails, and helping in all kinds of ways. So just remember your assistants today. We appreciate all the hard work that they do. And keep in mind, once again, it's Administrative Professionals Day. I know we've all got a busy day, but just make sure you tell your assistants thank you for the great job they do for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome and honoring. All right. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of resolutions.
Lear Lamberth, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With all resolutions properly filed, be introduced pursuant to Rule number 17 and placed on the consent calendar, refer to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Lear Lamberth, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing in line on the desk be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Lear Lamberth, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions line over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of bills, Senate bills on first consideration.
Lear Lamberth, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move the Senate bills 2011 transmitted by the Senate be held on the desk pending third consideration of its companion House bill.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration, petitions and memorials, reports of standing committees, reports of select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We pass the consent calendar on third and final consideration in keeping with Rule 50.
Gentlemen, moves passage of the consent calendar, probably second. Mr. Clerk, any objections have been filed?
Mr. Speaker, item 1, House Bill 1683 has been objected to by Chairman Dixie. Item 126, HJR 1385 has been objected to by Chairman Dixie.
Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we are voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change your vote? Camper, aye. Wendell, aye. Ogles, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
Having received the constitutional majority, I declare consent calendar passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Chairman Zachary, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know I'm out of order. I move that all debate be limited to 5 minutes per member for today's floor session.
That is a proper motion, properly seconded. We're voting to limit debate to 5 minutes per member. Is that an objection? All right. There's an objection to the question. Is that correct? All right. We're voting on previous question. Okay. Right. Okay, we're voting on previous question to take the vote on motion to limit the debate. Representative Clemens?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Parliamentary inquiry. The movement said that he knew he was out of order. Is it proper to make a motion when we're out of order?
Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Speaker, our rules do state that a majority of the members present may increase or decrease the limitations of time herein set out for debate on a particular bill, resolution, or motion.
Representative Clemens?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Clerk. My question was that the proper time to make said motion, given that he stated he was out of order when he made the motion?
Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure why the member felt that they were out of order. They were properly recognized by the Speaker, and they have presented a motion pursuant to our rules to limit debate.
Representative Clemens?
Thank you for clarifying that.
All right, we're voting on previous question. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 70, 22 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting to limit debate to 5 minutes per member. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 73, 18 nays.
Motion prevails. Call up first bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2675 by Leader Lamberth, relative to General Assembly members. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Roll to the heel of today's calendar, please.
Without objection, roll to the hill. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 681 by Representative Beck, relative to taxation.
Representative Beck, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 0681 on third and final consideration.
Representative Beck moves passage, Bobby Sexton. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Beck, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a local bill brought to me by the Nashville Hotel Motel Association. The bill is to give the local metropolitan government the ability to raise the hotel motel tax by up to 1%. This 1% will not be done unless all pieces to the puzzle for a new dome stadium of over 50,000 seats is approved and the funding is in place. Ladies and gentlemen, last year we passed a bill that gave the entire localities throughout our state the ability to raise their hotel motel tax to 8%. In that bill, metropolitan forms of government were excluded. That's the reason I have to stand before you today and ask you to give our authority to our local government to have the ability to raise the hotel and motel tax in order to build a new stadium up to 1%. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Beck renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just remind some of my colleagues that when you first ran for office, and probably since then as you run for re-election, you made some promises on the campaign trail. One of those likely was that you would not vote for a tax increase on your citizens. A few members in here, if they vote for this, actually will fulfill that promise, like Representative Beck, because he's not raising taxes on his constituents. This would raise taxes on your constituents and my constituents. Mine have called me about that. They realize this is a bad deal for them, not for Nashville, but for visitors to Nashville. It's a capital city. Our citizens have to come to Nashville for business, as we do. So I would just remind you of that. The other thing about this that is very concerning to me is some of the data that you've been given. The average economic impact that has been touted that many of these events would bring to Nashville if Nashville is allowed to raise this tax are greatly overinflated. They may be at best 10% accurate. The 2020 Super Bowl in Miami has been estimated, was laid on your desk, at $571 million of economic impact. What they don't tell you is that even the NFL estimated at best the event generated only $34.1 million of state and local taxes. So we're talking about a significant difference. In essence, the forecasts used to justify these taxpayer dollars are biased. The Minneapolis Super Bowl, for example, where in 2018, the city's tourism body was audited and found to have overestimated the economic impact of events brought to the city, including the 18 Super Bowl, by $200 million. Or Los Angeles, where the city and NFL officials estimated that year's Super Bowl would be as high as $477 million. A professor of sports management at the University of San Francisco put the number at $47 million. Again, 10% at best. So again, I just remind my colleagues to fulfill your obligations to your constituents and protect them from higher taxes, because they're the ones going to be paying this bill, not Representative Beck's. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Beck.
Members, in economic impact, in 2019, before COVID, the Titans' annual economic impact was $370 million to Middle Tennessee. This dome stadium will allow at least 15 additional ticketed events, including the possibly including the NCAA Final Four, the NCAA football playoffs, Super Bowls, WrestleMania, the Super Bowl's economic total impact was estimated to be $571 million in Miami. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an economic development package. Davidson County is generating approximately a third of all state sales tax. We ask for the ability to continue to be an economic engine for our state.
Representative Holsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My sentiments were expressed with Chairman Todd, so I back out.
Thank you. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question's been called. Any objection? We got objection. We are voting on previous question. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 60, 34 nays.
Previous question fails. We're back on the bill. Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I like to talk, but I don't usually say too much on the House floor. But I wanted to stand up here today and tell you that I have been the chairman of the local subcommittee for 8 years. We have tried to work on the hotel motel taxes for several years. 4 years ago, myself and another chairman got together, and we still couldn't get a bill passed that would create and satisfy the hospitality industry. But coming last year, we did. We got a bill that said, as the speaker has said, that cities can have 4%, counties can have 4%. And we did that so they wouldn't have to come down here year after year after year. Every year in our committee, we hear several to raise the hotel motel tax 1 cent, 2 cents, 3 cents, whatever. And we have to determine to do that. Now, this bill didn't come through my committee this year. We didn't see it. But I stand here today because I want to try to feel like this is a tourism package. I'm for tourism in Sevier County, and I don't feel right voting against this because I did, and we made the mistake that we didn't include metropolitan cities or metropolitan governments in the bill that we passed last year to fix all this. We thought we had it all fixed. Well, that goes to show you we didn't get it all fixed. So, ladies and gentlemen, I know that some of you don't want it, but as the chairman, I try to help and do all things for all cities and all counties. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I support your bill. I think it's nothing but right that we support this bill, because if we had got it right, he wouldn't be in front of us today. He could have done it without even coming here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Parkinson. Pat. 2 spaces. 3 spaces. Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I've always heard Nashville was one of the most expensive as far as hotels in the whole United States. So I just Googled, and the top 10 most expensive hotels in the United States, number 1 is Nashville. So I just want to let you know about that. Thank you.
Representative Beck.
Coach Byrd, I'm not sure which site you got that off of, but the last I checked, the average hotel price in Nashville is number 29th, in between Honolulu and Tucson. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of your legislation for a couple of reasons. Reason number 1, I was elected as a state legislator and not a West Tennessee legislator. I feel like wherever progress is made in this state, it benefits all of us, all across the state. And sure, Nashville is metropolitan, and there's a lot of expense that we have to pay to be in Nashville. I get that. But I do understand if Nashville grows, Bolivar, Tennessee will eventually indirectly grow. So I rise in support of your legislation because I was elected as a state legislator and not a West Tennessee legislator. And as long as we separate ourselves as 3 grand divisions, we're never going to get where we need to go. I think we have to support each other in these efforts if we want to do well in the state of Tennessee. And I just feel it's so important that we not separate ourselves in our communities, because that's where our people get confused when we do that. Thank you.
Representative Beck, anything? Representative Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's important to note that even with the potential raise that the sponsor it has before us, the hotel motel tax in Nashville will still be significantly lower than the hotel motel tax in my city and most likely yours if you go back and check. And again, we're looking at the bigger picture here. The Dome Stadium will bring not only the fiscal advantages to Nashville, but just think about what the Titans and the fact that NFL football is played in our city has done to raise the status of Nashville. And remember, they are the Tennessee Titans. But it's not just about the Titans and it's not just about the stadium. There's an incredible amount of development that will happen around that stadium, multi-use, retail, restaurants, bars, all of the same things. You're looking at the potential for another Broadway. So there is an incredible amount of fiscal advantage that can result from this bill, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Representative Beck, anything?
Good, thank you.
All right. Representative Powell.
Move previous question.
Previous question been called. Is there objection? Okay. We have objection on the previous question. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 79, 15 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 681 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 62, 26 nays, 4 present, unvoted.
House Bill 681 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolution 55 by Representative Reedy. A resolution proposing amendment to Article 9 of the Constitution of Tennessee relative to disqualifications.
Representative Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request the clerk read Senate Joint Resolution 55 for its third and final reading.
Mr. Clerk, please read the resolution.
Senate Joint Resolution 55 on third and final reading. A resolution to propose an amendment to Article 9 of the Constitution of Tennessee relative to disqualifications. Be it resolved by the Senate of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the House of Representatives concurring, that a 2/3 majority of all the members of each House concurring, as shown by the yeas and nays entered on their journals, that it is proposed that Article 9, Section 1 of the Constitution of Tennessee be amended by deleting the section. Be it further resolved that in accordance with Article 11, Section 3 of the Constitution of Tennessee, the foregoing proposed amendment shall be submitted to the people at the next general election in which a governor is to be chosen, the same being the 2022 November general election, and the Secretary of State is directed to place such proposed amendment on the ballot for that election. Be it further resolved that the clerk of the Senate is directed to deliver copies of this resolution to the Secretary of State, with this final resolving clause being deleted from such copies.
Representative Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 55.
Representative Reedy moves to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 55. Any discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Joint Resolution 55 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Cheryl, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, 1 nay.
After being read 3 times on 3 separate days, Senate Joint Resolution 55 having received the vote in the affirmative by a majority of the members of the Tennessee House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly, I hereby declare concurred and pursuant to Article 11, Section 3 of the Constitution of the State of Tennessee. Without objection, the motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolution 913 by Chair Lady Hazelwood, a resolution proposing amendment to Article 2, Section 31 of the Constitution of Tennessee to allow the investment of state funds in equities.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that the clerk read SJR 913 for its third and final reading.
Members, let me state for the record this one more time. After being read 3 times on 3 separate days, Senate Joint Resolution 55, having received a vote in the affirmative by 2/3 majority of the members of the Tennessee House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly, I hereby declare concurred and pursuant to Article 11, Section 3 of the Constitution of the State of Tennessee. Without objection, most reconsider table. All right, next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House is on Senate Joint Resolution 913 with Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that the clerk read SJR 913 for its third and final reading.
Mr. Clerk, please read the resolution.
Senate Joint Resolution 913 on its third and final reading. A resolution to propose an amendment to Article 2, Section 31 of the Constitution of Tennessee to allow the investment of state funds in equities. Whereas because Article 2, Section 31 prohibits the state from becoming an owner in whole or in part of any bank or a stockholder with others in any association, company, corporation, or municipality, the state cannot invest the state's funds in equities, including but not limited to ownership in both public and private companies. And whereas this prohibition can limit the return that the state receives upon the investment of its funds, and whereas the decreased rate of return can inhibit the state's ability to provide needed services to Tennesseans, and whereas a constitutional amendment is necessary to ensure that the state is able to invest its funds for the greatest benefit of its citizens. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the House of Representatives concurring, that a majority of all the members of each house concurring, as shown by the yeas and nays entered on their journals, that it is proposed that Article 2, Section 31 of the Constitution of Tennessee be amended by deleting the section and substituting instead the following. Section 31, the credit of this state shall not be hereafter loaned or given to or in aid of any person, association, company, corporation, or municipality. The state shall not become the owner in whole or in part of any bank or a stockholder with others in any association, company, or corporation. Notwithstanding the foregoing, the governing body or state official charged with carrying out the purpose or objectives of a fund or trust that is administered or invested by the state treasury and that contains state funds in whole or in part may adopt with approval of the treasurer and the comptroller of the treasury an investment policy to authorize all or part of such fund or trust to be invested such that the state would become an owner in whole or in part of any bank or a stockholder with others in any association, company, or corporation. Be it further resolved that the foregoing amendment be referred to the 113th General Assembly, and that this resolution proposing such amendment be published by the Secretary of State in accordance with Article 11, Section 3 of the Constitution of Tennessee. Be it further resolved that the Clerk of the Senate is directed to deliver copies of this resolution to the Secretary of State, with this final resolving clause being deleted from such copies.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 913.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 913. Any discussion? Representative Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I have the utmost respect for the sponsor who's done a great job with our budgets over the years. I have to speak up against this amendment to the Constitution, though. This is an important constitutional provision which prevents us from investing state monies in equities. I know we do it for our retirement accounts, but I just point out to everybody, we sit here, and we should do so proudly, in probably the most fiscally well-managed state in the United States. I don't know if you know this. Every so often, I've lost a vote up here in the General Assembly, and we haven't done what I wanted. But the fact of the matter is, if that's the will of the people, that's the way it's supposed to be. But what neither Republicans nor Democrats do up here is squander money they don't have or take irresponsible actions that place our children's money at risk, quite in contrast to many governments, including our federal government. Anyway, I think we have a proud tradition of fiscal responsibility. This constitutional provision protects us by ensuring that our state monies are only invested basically in risk-free investments. Seems like a small thing, and probably under our current treasurer, changing this constitution will not have any, constitutional amendment will not have any significant impact. But you can look in any direction of the compass and find many, many states that have gone down this road, loosened their fiscal controls, and every time there's a recession, they're struggling, defunding things, messing up their funding mechanisms because they didn't act fiscally responsible when times were good. Anyway, I know there's pressure to change our Constitution because our constitutional drafters wisely made it extremely difficult for the state and our local governments to mismanage money. I think this goes down the wrong road. Our Constitution is sound as it's written. We should keep it exactly the way it is. Sure, I'm not saying our current treasurer will misuse these funds, quite to the contrary, but we need to think 10, 20, 30, 40 years hence. Who knows who's going to be in leadership? So the bottom line is, I understand this is well-intentioned, but what it does, it loosens our fiscal controls. That's not a good road we should go down. There's not a reason in the world we have to do this. We should keep our constitutional provisions safeguarding our public money exactly as written. Thank you.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to my colleague from Davidson County, I respect your opinion as well. I beg to differ in this regard. I would point out that the proposed amendment language provides that state funds may be invested in equities, but that happens with the adoption of an investment policy that's developed by the governing body or the state official charged with carrying out the purposes or objectives of the fund or trust administered by the state. It has to be approved by the state treasurer and the comptroller. It's very similar to how the decisions are made right now on our TCRS funds and our endowment funds. Our treasurer, past, present, and hopefully future, we all have Tennessee values. We all want to be fiscally responsible. But in doing that, I think part of being fiscally responsible is being willing to recognize that we have a prohibition in the current Constitution that limits much upside. So this will give us an opportunity as a state to take advantage of upside opportunities in investment, which will in turn allow us to do more for our citizens. With that, I would just ask for passage. Thank you.
Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. To the sponsor, Madam Chair, what is in place that will help us mitigate losses, prevent us from losing principles, if this should become part of our Constitution?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
As I just said, Representative, the language provides that the state funds may be invested in equities, but that's with the adoption of an investment policy. So that investment policy would be developed by the governing body or the state official charged with carrying out the purposes or objectives of the fund or trust administered by the state. So again, we are not giving up oversight of this. We are just allowing more flexibility in how state funds are invested.
Representative Hardaway.
So to put it in layman's speak, it still has to come by the legislature on what that investment, what those parameters are.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The investment policies of this state are ultimately determined by the legislature and the constitutional officers that we elect.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Vogels.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the sponsor, Madam Chair, I do support the legislation, but just a couple concerns for this body to keep in mind. When this constitutional amendment, if it does pass, we will subject our comptroller and our treasurer to the influence of what billions of dollars can do. So now your comptroller and your treasurer are going to be lobbied by equity firms, as you will as well, to elect somebody that invests state money that's in their best interest. So there could be an opportunity. You know what happens with money, billions of dollars, its influence, its power. So just be cognizant of that in the future. I may suggest legislation in the future to limit the amount of lobbying to those two positions, or just keep guardrails on that. I do support the legislation, but just a concern I have in the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would point out to the colleague from Williamson County that these same policies currently exist. We have an enormous amount of money in our TCRS fund that are allowed to be invested in equities. And so the concerns that my colleague has raised, those have not proven to be a factor with those investments. And I would suggest that that would not be a problem in the future. Thank you.
Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you as well for bringing the bill. If you don't mind, can you acknowledge to the body how much, or rather than that, how many states across the country are utilizing this same formula?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
I'm sorry, I don't have that information. I would be happy to get that to you, but I don't have it in front of me.
Representative Towns.
I understand that we are probably one of the last few that may not be doing it for the most part. Most are doing it. At this point in time, if we don't invest money to get a higher percentage rate, how much pressure is it putting on us to keep and continue to paying our pensions at an accurate level?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Again, I think we're talking about two separate issues here because we have the TCRS funds, which we have been able to, because we can invest in equities, we've been able to substantially add funds from interest and earnings to that fund, which has reduced the amount of money that we had to put in from our general fund to take care of that. So again, this constitutional amendment would just allow the state with their own state monies to take advantage of potential upside in the market, and with the oversight of treasurer, comptroller, governing bodies of the state.
Representative Towns.
Oversight, as you speak of, are there external oversights as well?
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The oversight would be that the investment policy is developed by the governing body or the state official charged with carrying out the purposes or objectives of the fund or trust administered by the state. And that policy would then have to be approved by the state treasurer as well as the comptroller.
Representative Towns.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Joint Resolution 913 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 78, 11 nays, 1 present, I voted.
After being read 3 times on 3 separate days, Senate Joint Resolution 913 having received a vote in the affirmative by a majority of the members of the Tennessee House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly, I hereby declare concurrent and pursuant to Article 11, Section 3 of the Constitution of the State of Tennessee. Without objection, the motion reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2022 by Chair Lady Littleton, relative to the Department of Children's Services. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to the Senate Bill 1912.
Chair Lady Littleton moves substitute and form Senate Bill 1912, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1912 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Littleton moves passage of Senate Bill 1912 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill requires a case manager in the Department of Children's Services to report a suspected violation of a known court order to the law enforcement in the case if the case manager observes the person against whom the court order has been entered acting in violation of the court order, and the department currently has an open case on the family that the subject is to the court order. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Littleton renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1912 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Bill 1912 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2535 by Representative Alexander and others, relative to visitation and long-term care facilities. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to SB 2574.
Representative Alexander moves substitute and form Senate Bill 2574, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of SB 2574 on third and final consideration.
Representative Alexander moves passage of Senate Bill 2574 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill, as amended, ensures the right to the end-of-life visitation during a disaster or a public health emergency for COVID-19. The amendment 014796 makes the bill and removes the specific requirement to provide a negative test to visit. I renew my motion.
Representative Alexander renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2574 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Zero member votes. Any member wish to change your vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
Senate Bill 2574 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2380 by Representative Parkinson and others, relative to passenger rail transportation. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2343.
Representative Parkinson moves substitute and form Senate Bill 2343, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2343 on third and final consideration.
Representative Parkinson moves passage of Senate Bill 2343 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Parkinson renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2343 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, as any member wish to change your vote. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 75, 14 nays, 2 present, none voting.
Senate Bill 2343 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2109 by Leader Love and others relative to dualism. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2150.
Representative Love moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 2150, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2150 on third and final consideration.
Representative Love moves passage of Senate Bill 2150 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
House Insurance Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Insurance Committee Amendment Number 1 is in the Senate bill. Move to withdraw.
Objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this piece of legislation, I want to give credit to now Senator, but formerly Representative London Lamar for bringing this piece of legislation to me. It gives us a chance to study what doulas are and how they can contribute to increasing maternal health here in Tennessee. So very glad to have her give this piece of legislation for me to carry. She's gone on to the Senate side. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I would renew my motion.
Representative Love renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2150 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, as any member wish to change their vote. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 77, 13 nays.
Senate Bill 2150 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2915 by Chair Lady Hazelwood and others relative to the Chattanooga-Hamilton County Hospital Authority.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2915 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment rewrites a section of the bill. I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for a further explanation.
Chairman Crawford moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is concerning a private act for Hamilton County. It is supported by all the members of the Hamilton County delegation in the House. It would simply allow Erlanger Hospital to move to a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, much like UT has done with UT Hospital in Knoxville. Going forward, that would mean that the decisions about the operation of the hospital would be made by the board of the 501c3. We have ensured in this legislation that Erlanger's mission of providing access to care for everyone in Hamilton County, regardless of ability to pay, is maintained, that the role of Erlanger as a teaching hospital, which is critical in our community and in our region and to the state, would continue. And we've also made sure that the employees of Erlanger are protected in terms of their pensions and benefits, which have accrued over the life of their service. With that, Mr. Speaker, I would renew my motion.
Chair Lady Hazelwood renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2915 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, as any member wish to change their vote? Hodges, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, no nays.
House Bill 2915 and received a constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Resolution 208 by Speaker Sexton and Chairman Wendell, resolution to elect Glendon, Culver Jr., to the Nominee Commission to select candidates for the Director of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation.
Chairman Wendell, you recognize.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I move adoption of House Resolution 0208. I appreciate your support.
Chairman Wendell moves adoption. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Wendell, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion. I would just like to tell the chamber that Lanny Culver has practiced law in Cumberland and Bledsoe counties for 50 years. He's a very nice man, well respected in East Tennessee and the Upper Cumberland, and we'd appreciate your support. Thank you.
Chairman Wendell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Resolution 208, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Griffey, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
House Resolution 208, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare it adopted without objection. The motion reeks series table. Call up the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2762 by Chairman Doggett and others relative to the compensation of certain public employees. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Chairman Doggett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2522.
Chairman Doggett moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 2522, properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Chairman Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2522 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Doggett moves passage of Senate Bill 2522 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Roll to the Hill.
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for adoption, and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings us back to House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This will be no surprise, but the chair lady's amendment greatly improved mine, so I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Doggett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chairman Doggett renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2522 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays, 1 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 2522, I received a constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reeks series table. Call up the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2672 by Chairman Terry and others relative to state depositories. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bills on the desk.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2649.
Chairman Terry moves substitute form Senate Bill 2649, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2649 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Terry moves passage of Senate Bill 2649 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for adoption and defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting House Amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment states that if a state depository institution has a policy against financing fossil fuels, the treasurer may take that into consideration when contracting with them for primary cash management for the state. With that explanation, I renew my motion.
Chairman Terry renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, sir. To the sponsor, how will that change the current policy? What's the difference in current policy and where your bill would take us?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. Right now, current policy is that the state authorizes the treasurer and the Commissioner of Finance and Administration to designate a state depository bank for the state's primary cash management and banking services. And this says that he may take this into consideration when making that determination.
Representative Hardaway.
Okay, so right now they don't take it into consideration, or they do?
Chairman Terry.
Thank you. It's not required that they take that into consideration. It's the fiduciary duty of the treasurer to make the determination of where to place the state's cash management funds.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. And he may or may not actually base his decision on this. It's just one to be considered. And consideration means it's not a mandate, it's not mandatory. It's just something to talk about, think about, or research.
Chairman Terry.
That is correct.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Any further discussion? Representative Keisling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And sponsor, forgive me, I just, this one slipped up on me. So if I understand this correct, and back to the previous representative who was doing that, this is saying they more than likely would not be investing, is that correct, in any industry regarding fossil fuel? Is that correct? Is that the way I understand?
Representative Terry.
Thank you. I'm not sure I understand your question.
Representative Keisling.
I'm looking at the amendment. I'm reading the amendment. May take, and I'm picking out just a part of a sentence here where it picks up. It's following a comma. May take into consideration whether the depository has a policy that prohibits financing to companies in the fossil fuel industry, coal, right? Or any energy like that. That's what I'm asking.
Chairman Terry.
That is correct.
Representative Keisling.
Thank you, sponsor. Thank you, Speaker.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we are voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2649 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 77, 14 nays.
Senate Bill 2649 having received a constitutional majority, everybody declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk. Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the request of the member and consultation with others.
Any objection? Without objection, Mr. Clerk, call up next bill.
House Bill 1686 by Chairman Williams and others relative to Alzheimer's care.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate you and the leaders allowing us to take this bill out of the order because the guests in which it seeks to honor are in the gallery today. Mr. Speaker and members, I move passage of House Bill 1686 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Williams, Ms. Passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Shirley Hazelwood, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt.
Shirley Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 3 by Chairman Williams. Mr. Speaker, was not timely filed. He's allowed a 1-minute explanation.
Representative Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment would simply remove Section 3 from the bill, which was inadvertently left in the process. This just allows for that section to be removed because the rule promulgation is unnecessary. Move to consider amendment number 3.
You've heard the motion. We're voting for consideration of amendment number 3. All those in favor of considering amendment number 3, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member votes, any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
In accordance with Rule 60B, having received the necessary 2/3 vote, the motion to consider amendment number 3 prevails. Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1686 is very personal to me and my family, but also to a family that's in the gallery today. I lost my grandmother 2.5 years ago to Alzheimer's. It's a debilitating disease, but in the end, it's more difficult. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt amendment number 3.
Representative Williams moves adoption of amendment number 3, properly second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. We're on the, can we do aye votes? Is that okay with you all on this one? All right. All those in favor of amendment number 3 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now that we're in proper order. House Bill 1686, as I said before, is really important to me, my family. My grandmother died 2.5 years ago after a long battle with Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a very difficult disease on your loved ones, but the stress a lot of times is carried more so by the family than it is the member of your family, the loved one who has gotten Alzheimer's. And so this bill is an extremely important bill. It's named in honor of Colonel Thomas Bowden, who was Lieutenant Colonel, friends of the Whitson family. And so he's going to share a little bit about him in a moment. But what this bill would do, it would create a respite program, much like the Choices program that we currently have in the state, for those families or loved ones who need some time away from the care of their loved one. As you know, with Alzheimer's, it's 365 days a year, 24 hours a day care that you're having to provide. And so being able to go to the bank and deal with the issues of the day as it relates to your family is very difficult. And particularly if you're the only one, as Ms. Bowden was, who was caring for that loved one. And so this bill would allow for 4 hours a week and a 3-year pilot program, which will serve 225 of Tennessee families across the state, with the idea that if we can keep people with their loved ones in their homes, the longer we can do that, the more it's going to save the taxpayer, and the better benefit is going to be to the family. I'm very appreciative for the opportunity to work with Alzheimer's Tennessee and the Bowden family. And with that, Mr. Speaker, if with your indulgence, I'd like for Colonel Whitson to say, introduce the family.
Representative Whitson.
Thank you, Chairman Williams and Speaker. Just a little bit about the man that we're naming this bill after, Colonel Thomas Bowden. Colonel Bowden was born and raised in Tullahoma, Tennessee. He attended MTSU and graduated in 1972 as a distinguished military graduate from the ROTC program. Him and his wife, Barbara, moved all over the nation, serving our country with distinction. And Colonel Bowden ended up commanding as a brigade commander the Pershing missile units in Europe, the nuclear tip missiles that many, we feel, brought down the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union because it forced them to take down the Berlin Wall. And Barbara and Elizabeth, his daughter, are here today, and we honor you. And this just speaks highly of all you done for your husband and your dad, Elizabeth, during his illness. And we appreciate you, and we appreciate Tom's service. And this is, I think, something very fitting for his honor of a native son of Tennessee. Thank you.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ms. Bowden and her daughter have been here probably as much as I have in the last 2 years, and so we're very thankful that they got to be here today. With that being said, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Williams renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1686 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk. Please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
House Bill 1686 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed. I object to most for exterior table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2143 by Leader Lamberth and others.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I make a motion, roll this behind item number 25.
Without objection, roll it behind item 25. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2545 by Representative Alexander and others relative to medication aids. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2295.
Representative Alexander moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 2295, properly second. Without objection, so ordered. Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the passage of Senate Bill 2295 on third and final consideration.
Representative Alexander moves passage of Senate Bill 2295 on third and final consideration, properly second. Mr. Clerk, call for First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting House Amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a medication aids bill to allow CNAs to take a class and pass an exam following a successful candidate to administer medications in nursing homes and assisted living under supervision. They do not make any medication decisions and are prohibited from a host of medication activities. I renew my motion.
Representative Alexander renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2295 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
Senate Bill 2295, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2283 by Representative Beck and others relative to security guards and officers. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Beck, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2514. Please.
Representative Beck moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 2514, probably second. Without objection, so ordered. Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2514 on third and final consideration.
Representative Beck moves passage of Senate Bill 2514 on third and final consideration, probably second. Ms. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chairlady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for adoption and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chairlady Hazelwood moves adoption of Amendment number 2, probably second. And any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of Amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Beck, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last August, security cameras showed a group of men holding down 22-year-old Dallas Jordan Barrett during an altercation with security staff at Whiskey Row Bar here in Nashville on Broadway. He became unresponsive and then later died. A grand jury indicted 6 employees of Whiskey Row for reckless homicide and aggravated assault in connection with Barrett's death. 6 employees working with the security guards, 4 working as security guards, 4 of which were unlicensed, and the other 2 were not properly trained. What this bill does is it closes the gap between unarmed guards that you would hire from an agency and the training that they're required to have, and the guards that are hired through a proprietary security organization at these local taverns. You must have an ABC license to serve for this to affect your proprietary security organization or PSO. The security guards would have to be trained in CPR, de-escalation tactics, and proper and safe takedowns. And with that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I stand to take questions and renew my motion.
Representative Beck renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Representative Holsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, I just had a couple of questions. We're talking about bouncers, I'm assuming, in a bar. If you force these people to take de-escalation training, my question is, if they're not successful in that, in a suspect or somebody who's caused a lot of trouble in a bar, does that open them up for civil liability in that they were not successful in the de-escalation process?
Representative Beck.
It's not a pass or fail. It's just training required by the Department of Commerce and Insurance. If they, in this example, of course, they would be open to civil litigation because they acted outside their scope of their employment. We want to have them trained so that they will be able to do their job better. And it could be a defense to civil litigation also. Does that answer your question?
Representative Halsey. Very nice. Any further discussion? Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, sponsor, for the bill. As you know, I had a similar bill with Gilmore, and we chose to support yours. And ours was initiated because of an incident in Memphis, I won't name the store, where a gentleman who was in visiting from Chicago lost his life over loud music. And the only thing that I would suggest is, as we start to figure out what that training should look like, that we might want to start using the term non-escalation as we start to figure this thing out, how to get through the job of helping to keep the rest of the public and that those who are under the care of the security guard safe through non-escalation means. So I applaud you on the bill, and I ask you to consider working next year on a new sub or a new category, non-escalation training. But thank you very much. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Beck.
I certainly commit to that, and you're exactly right, Representative, in that we do want to protect our patrons. They're not out spending their money and for entertainment with the thoughts of not going home that night. So thank you very much.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2514 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 74, non-nays, non-present, non-voting.
Senate Bill 2514 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2278, Representative Powell and others relative to passenger rail transportation. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2602.
Representative Powell moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2602. Following second without objection. So ordered. Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2602 on third and final consideration.
Representative Powell moves passage of Senate Bill 2602 on third and final consideration. Following second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Transportation Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate Amendment. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill would direct TASR to deliver a report about the expansion of passenger rail across the state of Tennessee. Currently, there's several cities within the United States that have or without passenger rail. Nashville being the third largest, Knoxville being the seventh largest, Chattanooga the 19th, and the Tri-City area being the 24th. This would specifically look at the expansion of passenger rail across the state of Tennessee, specifically also looking at Amtrak as it relates to things that they're proposing. And I think this would be a tremendous asset to the state. With that, I would renew my motion.
Representative Powell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2602, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, nays 2 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 2602, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion read series table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2761 by Representative Reedy relative to solar energy development. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill's on the desk.
Representative Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move substitution and conform to Senate Bill 2797.
Representative Reedy moves substitute and form Senate Bill 2797, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2797 on the third and final consideration.
Representative Reedy moves passage of Senate Bill 2797 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call first.
House Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Halford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment Number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for adoption and defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 2, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a task or study on solar energy and I'll read from the amendment. The study must also examine for the purpose of determining any necessary consumer protections, the installation of solar energy generation and storage on property of residential electric customers. It is the legislative intent that this study be conducted within TASSER's existing resources. On or before September 30th of 2023, TASSER shall report its findings and recommendations, including any proposed legislation to members of Energy, Agriculture, Natural Resources Committee of the Senate and members of the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee of the House of Representatives. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Reedy renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senate Bill 2797 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast a vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 86, 6 nays.
Senate Bill 2797 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2609 by Chair Lady Hazelwood relative to sales and use taxes.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2609 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves passage by second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Baum, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move for adoption and defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Vice Chairman Baum moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill simply would allow for the Lookouts minor league baseball team in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Should they build a new stadium, they would be allowed to collect the sales taxes for things or keep the sales tax that was collected for items sold within the stadium. This is very similar to what we have done for other stadiums across the state. There is a difference I'd like to point out and something that I would hope that we would consider doing on any future arrangements of this kind, and that is that the education portion of that tax remains with the county. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Hazelwood renews her motion. Any discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2609 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 79, 11 nays, 3 present, on voting.
House Bill 2609 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most read series table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 325 by Chairman Curcio relative to indigency funds. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill's on the desk.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0887.
Chairman Curcio moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 887, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 887 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Kershaw moves passage of Senate Bill 887 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized. Oh, sorry. Vice Chairman Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1 is similar to the Senate Amendment Number 1. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move to withdraw House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chairman Kershaw renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Dixie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just could you explain to me that is this setting up a different fund for the DUI monitoring, or is it setting up a task force, or is it doing both?
Chairman Kershaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, the bill as amended simply sets up a task force that must meet and come up with recommendations for the General Assembly on how to fix the EMIF fund. It doesn't do anything to the existing fund.
Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. We are voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 887, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Hazelwood, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Bill 887, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion for reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2392 by Chair Lady Moody.
Chair Lady Moody, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I request my bill to be rolled 20 spaces.
Without objection, roll 20 spaces. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 846 by Representative Sherrill relative to correctional teachers.
Representative Sherrill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I make a passage that we move with third consideration.
Representative Sherrill moves passage. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're going to move this to the Hill, please.
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment Number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 2. Probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings us back to House State Government Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We move to adopt, move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Sherrill, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 0846. This is for our teachers in our prison system that work for our Department of Corrections, have a difficult job. They are essential teaching in the reform school every day, 12 hours out of the year, 12 months out of the year. Right now, the teachers in the correctional system are paid based on the geographical local in which the prison sits. So a teacher at the Bledsoe County Correctional Complex is paced upon the Department of Education scale for Bledsoe County and immediate surrounding counties. This is one of the last, if not the last, state-level job classes in which they pay in a geographical base rather than being based on the job itself. The amendment does not, one key thing, it dilutes the current statutory geographical restrictions for the correctional teachers' pay scale so that we can move forward in a statewide job class. And there's about $1,400,000 in the governor's FY 22-23 budget for the change, and that will provide a 12% increase to affect the job class. And I move to the motion.
Representative Sherrill renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill?
Thank you, Speaker Sexton. To the sponsor, is there any relationship between the salary and the actual performance of these teachers? Is the performance and evaluation Is that tied to the salary?
Representative Sherrill.
This will be based on just like a regular teacher is.
Hardaway.
Okay, so does that mean, yes, there is an evaluation in place that determines how well they're doing their job and thus the salary range?
Representative Sherrill.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. We are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 846 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
House Bill 846 having received no objection, the motion for reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 630 by Representative Gillespie and others relative to elderly and vulnerable adults. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and confirm Bill 0439.
Representative Gillespie moves 439, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 0439 on third and final consideration.
Representative Gillespie moves passage of Senate Bill 439 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 2.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 2 creates a registry of unlicensed elderly or vulnerable person care facilities. With that explanation, Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 2.
Chairman Kershaw moves adoption of amendment number 2, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Gillespie renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 439 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Freeman, aye. Hardaway, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Senate Bill 439 received constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2009 by Representative Gillespie relative to aggravated assault. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Gillespie.
I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2087.
Substitute and form Senate Bill 2087, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage on Senate Bill 2087 on third and final consideration.
Representative Gillespie moves passage of Senate Bill 2087 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it first amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1, same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment Number 1 is in the Senate bill. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I think this is the third or fourth time I've been up here and brought to you some legislation that is deeply to my heart and a huge problem here in Memphis, or here in Nashville and in Memphis and across the state. And what we have going on here are interstate shootings and people committing aggravated assault and just shooting at people they know and they don't know. And what this bill would do is if you were convicted of aggravated assault and that aggravated assault was you discharging a firearm from a motor vehicle at someone else, it would automatically require an escalation one level up on that felony that jury gives you. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Gillespie renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Those in favor of Senate Bill 2087, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts a vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mitchell, aye. Wendell, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Bill 2087 has received constitutional majority. Everybody declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. All right. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
1927 by Leader Lamberth.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to roll this beyond item 59 on today's calendar.
Without objection, roll the item after item 59. Very good. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1416 by Chairman Curcio, relative to human trafficking. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1378.
Chairman Curcio moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 1378, probably second. Without objection, so ordered. Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1378 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Curcio moves passage of Senate Bill 1378 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for adoption and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of House Amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting House Amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 2, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Motion.
Chairman Curcio renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1378 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
Senate Bill 1378, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection to most reconsidered table. Call next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2143.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, if we could roll this beyond item 32.
Without objection, roll to after item 32. Call next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1405 by Chairman Halford.
Chairman Halford, at your desk.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to roll this for 2 spaces.
Without objection. Without objection, roll 2 spaces. Bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1188 by Representative Garrett, relative to conditions of bond. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and form to Senate Bill 0882.
Representative Garrett moves substitute and form Senate Bill 882, probably second. Without objection, so ordered. Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 0882 on third and final consideration.
Representative Garrett moves passage of Senate Bill 882 on third and final consideration, probably second. Ms. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate Amendment number 1, move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Garrett renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do you know what the average cost is, like a daily cost or for 30 days to have the interlock equipment on your car?
Representative Garrett.
Use a maximum of $125 a month.
Chairman Dixie.
You said $125 per month? Maximum. So my question, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. Does this count for the first DUI or the second DUI?
Representative Garrett.
It does not count for the first DUI if that's the only thing you're charged with. If you're charged with a DUI and you've got a minor in your vehicle, you have property damage or some other aggravating factor, then this bill would take place in that particular instance.
Chairman Dixie.
So this isn't in lieu of bail, it's in addition to.
Representative Garrett.
Yes.
Chairman Dixie.
Using your attorney's experience, how long would you say that a DUI case normally lasts? Would it be 6 months, 8 months?
Representative Garrett.
That's hard to determine based upon the court's schedule, their dockets, et cetera. I mean, that can last up to a year. So what we're finding is someone will have a first DUI, and before that first DUI is actually adjudicated, they get another one. And so that's the reason why this is important to stop that second offender from re-offending in the DUI sense, because they can get into their car, start it without the device stopping them in the event they're inebriated or drunk or whatever the case may be.
Chairman Dixon.
Thank you. I just want to make sure on the first DUI, it doesn't matter if it's something that's aggravated or, having an additional circumstance with it. But on the second one, if you do a second DUI, is it regardless or it does have to have an aggravated? Just for clarity.
Representative Garrett.
You're right. If it's your second DUI, yes, this will apply. If it's just your first and there's no other aggravating factors, this does not come into play. And for your purposes of your questions, the judge still has discretion in this particular instance. It's not mandatory that this is a condition of bond. So the judge still has, based upon the factors in front of the judge, the right to say you may not get an interlock if it's your second, or there's factors present.
Chairman Dixon.
Well, I was just reading the bill. Unless it's in the amendment, it says that it's mandatory condition of bail for this.
Representative Garrett.
It's not mandatory. The only thing the amendment did was change the effective date.
Chairman Dixon.
And one last question. Do you know or have any idea how many companies that actually provide this particular service right now in Tennessee?
Representative Garrett.
I don't have the exact number, but there's multiple companies that do this for the state of Tennessee.
Chairman Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 882, vote aye. When the bell rings, those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change your vote? Wendell, aye. Mr. Clerk.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Bill by clerk passed by objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr.
Farmer and others relative to recovery courts.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2663 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Farmer moves passage. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Jernigan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1 rewrites the bill. I move to adopt and defer the sponsor for explanation.
Vice Chairman Jernigan moves adoption. Amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, what this bill does, it creates the Mental Health Treatment Act of 2022. And I want to thank our speaker for allowing me the opportunity to carry this piece of legislation. This is going to help many folks that's going through our court system that has addiction issues, maybe PTSD from serving our country. And it's going to create a mental health court treatment program and add to what we already have in place in some jurisdictions. We'll make it statewide. So really going to be helping people. And thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to carry this piece of legislation. And members, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I renew my motion.
Chairman Farmer renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2663 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
House Bill 2663 having received a constitutional majority, everybody declare passed by objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings the body back to item 26. Item 26, House Bill 1405 by Chairman Halford, relative to sales taxes. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Halford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0905.
Chairman Halford moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 905, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Chairman Halford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage on South Bill SB Senate Bill 0905 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Halford moves passage of Senate Bill 905 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Ms. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Same as Senate Amendment number 1, move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Halford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chairman Halford renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Chairman, is this your last bill on the floor?
Chairman Halford.
Yes, sir, it is.
Leader Lambert.
Chairman Halford, just wanted to rise, and I know we've honored you multiple times already, but and I don't think you can honor a fellow like you too often or too much. But just want to say congratulations on your last piece of legislation, and I hope the board certainly lights up green. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Chairman Halford.
Mr. Speaker, this may be one of the most significant bills I've ever passed in my 14 years here. This is going to give all the farmers across Tennessee a great advantage over what they have now. So it has been my honor to carry this bill. And so I thank you members for voting for my bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Well, as usual, Chairman Halford said all that needs to be said. I just want to thank him. I think it's a great way. If you're going to have a last bill in this body, this is a great one to go out on. You're going to be remembered by all the farmers in Tennessee because it is going to make an impact on their business and their livelihood. So thank you, sir, for carrying it.
Thank you. Representative Grills.
District 77, agriculture is king over there. And for all the farmers, we want to thank you for this bill and for the efforts you put forth over the past few years to make sure this bill gets to the point where it is today. And thank you for being who you are. I love you and thank the world of you.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. Chairman, on behalf of the urban ag community, we appreciate you too. I want to thank you for your guidance in helping us to rewrite that urban ag legislation that rewrote the law. And we just thank you for the way that you've handled your chairmanship. You've been fair in the way that you've administered it. Everyone has been heard. It's been orderly. And I thank you. You're the only reason I want to serve on ag.
Chairman Alford.
Representative Hardaway, you wrote the book on urban ag, so I appreciate that very, very much.
All right. Any further discussion? Representative Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you bringing this. This brings some simplicity to the code of all the mixture of rules and things that we have around agricultural exemption. So I appreciate you bringing this clarity and expanding it a little bit because of these folks that are producing our food and products in this state. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 905, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Receive constitutional majority. Everybody declare pass without objection. The motion reads here is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2436 by Chairman Farmer, relative to the Tennessee Promise Scholarship. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk. Mr. Speaker, this is back to item 29.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2631.
Chairman Farmer moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 2631. Properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to pass the Senate Bill 2631 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Farmer moves pass the Senate Bill 2631 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Ms. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate Amendment number 1, so I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, members, I think this may be one of the best bills I've had the opportunity to carry since I've been here. Honest. It was brought through from a constituent, and what it does is this. Let me tell you what it does. This is going to allow for 1,173 kids to go on to college that weren't and take advantage of the Tennessee Promise Scholarship, because right now the law says you got to graduate as a senior, take advantage of that money. But guess what? We're going to create a mechanism where kids that graduate early can go on to school and take advantage of that scholarship money. And the fiscal note says there's going to be at least 1,173 kids that's going to be able to take advantage of this. So it's a good bill, and I'd ask for passage. I renew my motion.
Chairman Farmer renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2631, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their vote, does anyone wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Senate Bill 2631 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2666 by Representative Sexton, relative to educational materials. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Sexton, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute conform Senate Bill 2247.
Representative Sexton moves substitute form Senate Bill 2247. Probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Sexton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2247 on third and final consideration.
Representative Sexton moves passage of Senate Bill 2247 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Ms. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Education and Instruction Amendment number 1.
Chairlady Moody, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Roll to the Hill.
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Roll to the Hill.
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 3.
Chairlady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for adoption and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chairlady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 3. Probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 3 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, we're back to the heel of the amendments. Education and Instruction Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Moody, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 2 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does is it sets up the State Textbook Commission. It brings the libraries underneath their foresight as well, and they have final say on what is put in our libraries. But the LEAs also have their portion and their part in it as well. So it broadens out how that we're putting books in our school libraries, and it gives the State Textbook Commission the final say on what goes into our libraries, so that we're making sure we're putting age-appropriate books there. And we're also adding 3 members to that Textbook Commission. We're adding 2 librarians. Well, they can be retired or active, and they'll be voting members. And then we're adding 1 ex officio member, a non-voting member, which will be the state librarian. So with that recommendation, I renew my motion.
Representative Sexton renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor. What's the purpose for this legislation?
Representative Sexton.
Thank you for the question. The purpose of this legislation is to make sure that we're putting age-appropriate books in whatever age grades that these are. These people that we're adding on, the governor adds, Speaker of the House adds, and the lieutenant governor adds. And they're looking at these books, or this State Textbook Commission be looking at these books. Books will be put in the libraries for 5th, 6th grade, whatever grade that it is.
Representative Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Don't decide what's appropriate to go in a library, and why are we usurping the authority of librarians and placing the state in the place of deciding what's appropriate and what's not for our children?
Representative Sexton.
Really not sure who is putting these books in our libraries. Yes, the librarians do have authority over that. They may be the ones that's actually signing off. We really don't know. But what we do know is there's been books that's been put in our libraries that are obscene in nature and certainly not age appropriate for our children. Books that are pornographic, books that we could not read on regular television or even out here, words that could be said to the opposite sex that would be harassment, considered harassment. And so that's the reason that we're bringing more oversight to this.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So can you give us a firm example of what school and what book you're speaking of?
Representative Sexton.
I can give you some off the top of my head, but I could give you a list of books. And to my knowledge, I think it was, and I may not have these numbers exactly right, but they're going to be real close. I think we found obscene material in something like 93 out of 95 counties in school libraries. So they're all over the place. One is Me and Earl and a girl named Pearl. It's very, very sexual in nature and pornographic in nature.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's fair to say what one person would deem inappropriate may not be what another person deems appropriate. And those who are adequately trained and educated and knowledgeable enough with the experience to make those decisions are called librarians. And we employ them and pay them with taxpayer money for a reason. I don't understand why we would be taking authority away from them to decide what is best in an educational setting. The final thing I would like to add or ask is, let's say you take these books out of the library. What are you going to do with them? You going to put them in the street? Light them on fire? Where are they going?
Representative Sexton.
I don't have a clue, but I would burn them.
Representative Clemens.
That's what I thought. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How many members are on the textbook commission with your additions?
Representative Sexton.
There'll be 12 voting and 1 non-voting.
Representative Johnson.
And how many of those are child development experts, have had training in education in age level, development level? How many are educators? How many are librarians of those folks? How many are required to be any of those things?
Representative Sexton.
I don't really know, but I can tell you this. My mama raised 10 kids and she had none of that training, and she done a great job. She helped raise 23 great-grandchildren. So I don't know of a parent anywhere that has to go to school to learn how to be a parent. I think we use common sense on these things to know what is appropriate and inappropriate. We turn the TV off when they say certain words, and that's what we're doing in libraries. We're turning these books off that are not appropriate, that uses words that are very illicit, not only just words, but some of these books have drawings. I've seen them, and I'm sure that you have too. And we would consider them XXX and pay a premium price to go see it at the movies. And so somehow these books are getting in the libraries, and I just thank God that we are doing something about it.
Representative Johnson.
I'll have to trust you on that thing about the movies, but I guess my concern is that I understand and I respect that your mom raised 10 kids. That's awesome. And raised them the way that she thought was right. And I appreciate that so much. However, some folks would let their kids read books that other folks wouldn't. And I don't believe a handful of people should be the determinant for what everyone in the states has available to them. Because for some kiddos, the only thing that they'll ever see, the only book that they'll ever see is in a school library that they have access to in the place where they are. And whether it's about, cultural differences or things like that, I absolutely respect a parent's right to stop their children from reading things they don't want to have them read. I find it completely unacceptable that we would determine what other kids can read in other families. And so books need to be available, but you can keep your child from reading things that you don't think they should be reading. I just don't think a handful of people should determine that. We have used the Miller test. That's what librarians use. They're trained to make those determinations. But history hasn't looked fondly on those who ban books or those who burn books. I'm not sure that's who we want to be included with.
Representative Sexton.
I won't be on the commission, so I won't, there won't be any burning books. We're not banning books. We're just removing them from the library. This was all brought about by parents, and I agree with you that parents should have the right to let their children teach them however that they want to, whatever religion or no religion at all. I believe parents have that right. This legislation establishes an appeals process for any parent to use to challenge on the placement of a book. So they actually can add books to the library that has to go through the commission to determine whether or not they can put that book in there, or the removal of books or materials from the list. So it assists the schools in responding to these complaints that they're having by the parents. It sets up a process by which that they can add books or take books away.
Representative Johnson.
I have serious fears about the size of our libraries going forward. The way we are shrinking the world for our young people who need to learn about the world and learn about their community and other communities. This bill is dangerous and is taking Tennessee in a dangerous direction.
Representative Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the sponsor, I do have a question. I've been getting several emails from the librarians of my district, some fantastic folks that serve our children in our school systems there, especially in Giles County. I had an opportunity to meet with many of them about a little over a month ago. When there was some other legislation coming through, we sat down for about 2 hours and went through it. But over the last 2 days, they've been reaching out to me, asking some very specific questions. And so I was hoping that you could address some of these issues with me. One was this list that is going to be created. Can you elaborate as to this list that these books will be put on?
Representative Sexton.
Yes, to my knowledge, there's nothing in this legislation that creates a list. It just addresses age-appropriate material for these children in whatever age group that they're in.
Representative Doggett.
Okay, thank you. So you're saying there's no list that will come down from this state board that will tell our local librarians that these are the books that you will only be allowed to have in your library, and if there's books in your library that are not on this list, they'll have to come out.
Representative Sexton.
It's my understanding that the LEAs will make a list of all the books that they have in their library. And once they've made that list, then they will turn that into the state textbook commission. And the state textbook commission will look at it. And if they deem that anything in there is not age appropriate, it will be removed. But they're adding 2 librarians to this commission. So there'll be 2 librarians that will have a voice in it where they don't now, to my knowledge. So we're adding those 2, and we're also adding a non-voting member, but she would have a voice on this committee, which is the state librarian. So we're adding and including the librarians in what we're doing.
Representative Doggett.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I just wanted to clarify that there's not going to be a list sent to the school districts stating that these are the only books that you'll be allowed to have, but that the school districts themselves will compile a list of the books that they offer to the students, and then it will go before this board.
Representative Sexton.
That's correct. As far as that, I understand the legislation. Also, each year, the LEA, the books that's been added to the library, they will send that in to the State Textbook Commission. They will be reviewed again. And we're only looking at, when I say we, this legislation only addresses the very explicit, that's sexual in nature or just not age appropriate, to be removed. Thank you.
Representative Doggett. All right. Representative Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a quick question about donations of books to school libraries. A number of us are donating the Aiken Bible. would there be a procedure, a requirement of approval for this donation to be made? Thank you.
Representative Sexton.
It's a great question. There's an established appeals process, as I said before, for a parent to challenge any books that's in there, and also have placements of books that are put in. So to address your question, though, it would be my understanding, and I can speak with legal, but it would be my understanding that that would be up to the state textbook commission to look at that to see if it's appropriate.
Representative Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the sponsor. A number of us, like I say, I believe in the first week of May, maybe 20 copies of the Aiken Bible will be donated to Blount County Schools between Senator Swan and myself. So should we hold up on that, or what kind of guidance if this bill passes? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Sexton.
To my knowledge, nothing in this would prohibit you from going ahead and doing that. The librarians will make that choice, and let me confer with legal just a moment.
Representative Sexton.
After conferring with legal, we're not in the same posture as Senate. So we will be going to conference on this. So unless someone objected, there wouldn't be a problem with donating the Bible. And then if there is a problem, someone does object, it would have to go through, the process of looking at it in appeals. So I think that takes care of it.
Representative Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question been called. There's an objection. I see objection. We're voting on previous question. All those in favor vote aye. When the bell rings, those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 68, 24 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2247 as amended vote aye. When the bell rings, those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 66, 26 nays.
Senate Bill 2247 and received constitutional majority. Everybody declare passed by objection. Most reconsider table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2676 by Chairman Zachary related to procurement.
Chairman Zachary, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage of House Bill 2676.
Chairman Zachary moves passage. This probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Keesling, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amendment does rewrite the bill. We'll defer to Chairman Zachary for further explanation. We move to adopt.
Chairman Keesling moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Zachary, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this simply provides for further transparency for sole source contracts during an emergency situation. With that, I renew my motion.
Chairman Zachary renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. To the sponsor, does this bill address any of the affirmative action or diversity programs?
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This only deals with emergency purchases from sole source contracts.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, just to be clear, so it does not, is what you're saying. It does not impact any of the diversity programs in purchasing.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This only deals with emergency purchases and sole source contracts.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. And if any of those emergency purchases involved programs which are designed to increase diversity, is there language in here that deals with that?
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, this only deals with emergency purchases and sole source contracts, providing transparency to those. Only in emergency purchases as defined in the bill, and it would give fiscal review the ability to review those. That's all it does.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, I think I get it. So you're not changing anything other than creating transparency.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's correct.
Representative Hardaway, very good. Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Sponsor, would you say this is providing greater oversight on the sole source contracts than what we've had previously, the questionable contracts that were handed out by this governor during the pandemic? So is this bringing greater oversight?
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This brings further transparency to that process.
Representative Mitchell.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 2676 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
All those in favor of House Bill 2676 as amended, vote aye. Oh, sorry. House Bill 2676 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. Most read series table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2661 by Chairman Sapicki and others relative to pharmacy benefit managers.
Chairman Spicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2661 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Spicki moves passage by second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Insurance Committee, Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to the Hill.
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 2. Probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings us back to House Insurance Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment number 2 improves on number 1. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Spicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chairman Spicki renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. We're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 2661 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Powers aye. Vaughn aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 82, none nays.
House Bill 2661 having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The most read series table. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we've been hard at it for several hours now, and I believe our speaker would like to give us a nice lunch break for everybody to go get some food. And I think there's some folks that have constituents in town. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I would make a motion that we recess until 2:30 today to take up hopefully the remainder of our calendar.
Without objection, recess till 2:30. Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to remind everybody there's popsicles downstairs as you walk out the front door of the Capitol here on your way to Cordell Hall. So please go enjoy some popsicles.